Hello everyone, welcome to Analytic Power Rankings for MLP. I'm your host for the day, DJ, and I'm sure you're all very excited, as I am, to go through this. So I had help from Dawson in ranking them, and I hope that this will be entertaining for all of you, as this was very entertaining to put together. So, without further ado, let's get right into it with number 16. This is God, where this team has a lot of issues. So this is draft order. For most of the teams, there's one exception, but I'll get to that later. But this team was pick 2, round 1 Iron Bundle, which is not good, especially with what it followed up with later on. Iron Bundle is not a bad Pokemon, but it definitely has a lot of flaws, especially this early on, and then especially later on with how it was followed up. Annihilate is not a good round 2. Kilowattrel is not a good round 3. Grimmsnarl is not a good round 4. And in fact, until it basically gets into the late tiers, probably around Gliscor, every single one of these picks is the worst Pokemon of the round. And that does include a certain meme pick that is being brought up later. I think this team desperately wants something that can actually be abusive that isn't named Espathra, because Espathra isn't actually a good pick. It's just kind of there pretending that it's a decent. In fact, I think this team would benefit greatly from having Terra on Gliscor, and Espathra was just shot. Just exiled from this team and something else was picked up. It's probably going to get like a couple of free wins because it's Espathra, and that's just what it does. But in terms of like an actual team structure, Gliscor would be a much better pickup. Hell, Chiyu is there, even if it doesn't necessarily fit within the budget, and it would kind of push Annihilate to the side. There's a lot going on in this team that just doesn't really synergize well, and Espathra is one of those. Another example is actually Archaludon, where this team kind of feels like it's wanting a rain core, but Kilowattrel and Archaludon are the only things that actually abuse rain. I guess Iron Bundle technically. But there's no rain setter aside from like manual rain, Kilowattrel, or Iron Bundle or something. I don't actually know if Kilowattrel gets rain dance. If it does, then that's like an option to bring maybe. And that's excluding from the fact that this team's weaknesses are pretty atrocious. It gets completely and totally destroyed by fairies. And sure, you have good enough ground answers, but like half your team is weak to ground that doesn't want to be. And it's not like Gliscor is bad. Kilowattrel is bad, especially that early. But Gliscor is actually a pretty good option as a ground answer. But I still feel like this team just desperately suffers into any ground type that has ice coverage, which isn't necessarily that uncommon. I don't know, it's kind of hard to say specifically, but I think that just Espathra in particular brings this team way down, where it's a vampire sucking the viability out of this team. So because of that, it is rank number 16. Which brings us to the next team, which you probably will somewhat see in the thumbnail. It's Zenom's team with the round 1 pick 1 Phalanx, which this is the exception where Dawson did all the setup for this, and his prep document apparently is broken, so he couldn't put Phalanx at pick 1, but Phalanx was pick 1, round 1, in the Diamond pool, which is also the same pool that This Is God is in. And yeah, this team also has some pretty big issues. So the round 1 Phalanx, I get the meme factor, it's definitely strong. The problem is that it's not actually followed up upon very well at all, where round 2 wheel Kieran Black and Iron Treads is decent, but Kieran Black isn't, especially considering some of the things that are left in the pool, such as Darkrai, Garchomp, Raging Bolt, and it just immediately kind of kills any hope for this team to be decent. There are a few decent pieces. I think Iron Moth is really strong, and in fact, if anything, it's actually kind of underpriced for what it brings to a team. Mew is a little bit strange, but also at the same time, it fulfills a kind of abuser role, but while not being at like a premium price. Garganacl doesn't make a lot of sense to me on this team. Neither does Slowking to an extent. I get the Slowking angle a little bit, it's a slow pivot. But again, my main issue is just more that there's not really a premium strength to this team. This team very much has a few individual things that can do okay. But I'm just not scared if I face this team. Like, Kyurem is effectively what you're banking your hopes on, and Kyurem just doesn't really do that. And I mean, again, I get the meme factor with the Phalanx. Phalanx isn't good, and it's not a particularly good one-pointer, but I get the meme factor. And at least it's better than This Is God's team. That's all I can really say about this team, to be completely honest. It also kind of... Iron Treads is very much required to keep rocks off for Kyurem and Iron Moth, which, you know, Iron Treads is good at that, but you also don't want to have to rely on it all the time. Mandibuzz does bring Defog, but again, you don't want to have to try and clear hazards for this team, especially because your only reliable rock setters are Treads and Garganacl, which both suffer from 4-move syndrome, and you don't actually have a lot of hazard setting capabilities outside of that. You have T-Spikes, Iron Moth, but you don't have anything that actually gets like spikes or anything, which does hurt the offensive capabilities of a team that, you know, your fastest Pokemon that can deal damage is Iron Moth. Talonflame isn't really there for DPS, it's there mostly for support. And this team's resistances are also kind of all over the place. I think this team suffers a lot into rock types specifically, because your main defensive capability against those is Iron Treads, which struggles into ground coverage. And this it actually does well into fightings, which is good for a Kyurem team, but kind of a lot of other angles it suffers, and I think that's kind of the big issue. So for those, it's rank 15. So next up, rank number 14, we have Mist, where her team leads off with a back wheel. This is in the Pearl Analytic pool. Back wheel, Tinglu, Iron Bundle, and again, it's the round 1 Iron Bundle, well, round 1, round 2, whatever you want to call it, that kind of immediately sets this team back, where Tinglu really wants to have something that it can coexist with effectively to help kind of supplement the fact that Tinglu isn't necessarily passive, but it's not a primary abuser. And at the time, there were some decent options to pair it with still available. like Terapagos. No, Terapagos wouldn't pick one. Because funny pool, but let's see. I mean, Zarude is one option at the very least. And point is, there are better options to pair Tinglu with the bundle. Pretty much anything above 14 points, even if it's a dark type, honestly, is a good partner. And there's still other Pokemon that are in the pool that could potentially fix that. But you have Tinglu, you have Iron Bundle, and then the Toxapex is a little bit confusing because it's really early, and it fulfills the grounded poison role for this team, but it doesn't actually contribute anything to helping out with a couple of key issues this team has. First of which being your ice resistance is Jirachi. Or sorry, not ice. Freeze dry. Right, freeze dry. That's what I'm saying. So freeze dry, it doesn't actually help into that necessarily, which its distribution isn't great, but it's still an issue, and it's a fighting resistance, which helps, and it's a grounded poison, which helps, but it's just so passive and doesn't really cover for some of the later pickups that you got, because you actually have some really good pieces in this team. Zapdos is really good, Jirachi is really good, Cyclizar, kind of a wasted Terra in my opinion, but it's a good Pokemon, and Iron Bundle is decent, but it's not really a premium abuser that you'd like to have pairing with Tinglu. So it's just kind of one of those situations where this team's kind of inflated a bit by Tinglu existing, where you have really strong hazard setting capabilities, but you don't really have the offenses to back it up. I think that's kind of where the placement of this team ultimately lies, where it just doesn't really have a strong wow factor of a Pokemon behind it to back up some decent overall options in there, where it's like if you have, like in a game of chess, you have your entire board is full of knights, pawns, rooks, but you don't have a queen to be your main driving force to help push into the opposing team, the opposing side. So I think that's ultimately why it's 14th place. So next up, in 13th place, we have Zippy's team from Diamond Pool, which was 7th pick. And I think the main thing with this team is that there are a few key flaws with it for me. The first pick in Greninja is solid. Landorus Incarnate as a follow-up is a little bit underwhelming, especially considering some of the things that were left in the pool that could supplement that. I mean, Greninja's maybe a bit early even. It's arguably not a round 1. And then if you get Greninja, you definitely want to Terra it. You don't want to pick up some of the other stuff later, but the main thing is actually the later rounds. Alolan Ninetales is a bad round 3 for a lot of reasons. It's kind of weak, it's a little passive, all it does like one niche well, and then you don't actually have anything else that abuses snow alongside it to justify picking it up that early. I like Quaquaval a lot, but I don't think it's worth it to justify picking it up Terra over Greninja, especially if you have Greninja on your team. It fulfills the spin role okay, but you really want other things to fulfill that better. And then the steel types on this team are not very good. Magnezone and Heatran just don't really fulfill that role very well, especially on a team with Pokemon that are already kind of aren't the pinnacles of offense. Because Heatran doesn't even have like Eruption this generation. You can't even like run a surprise offensive set very effectively. And Magnezone has a couple of niches against specific steel types, but your team doesn't struggle into them necessarily. And then the low tiers, I don't rate Indeedee, especially on this team, where Indeedee kind of does well with things that benefit from Psychic Terrain. Nothing on this team benefits from Psychic Terrain. Weezing can be okay, but it doesn't fit on this team. Again, you really want a good, strong, grounded poison as opposed to Weezing. And Diancie doesn't really help out that much either. You have 2 fairy types, which I guess is a thing. 2 steel types, which I guess is a thing. And I'm not necessarily like too caught up on like the Fairy Dragon Steel or whatever. But none of these are particularly effective for their roles. Diancie's okay. That's kind of a bit of a saving grace to an extent, but again, you don't necessarily want that Terrid over Greninja. And I feel like this team basically really wants, kind of like the previous examples, something that can fully embrace being a top tier abuser that isn't Greninja. Where, I don't know, non-Terra Greninja kind of has a lot of issues, especially in a team like this. Which ultimately I think is where, like, it's better than the previous 3 teams for me. But it just struggles in a lot of role capacities. Which is ultimately what ended up getting it placed at 13th. So next up at rank number 12, we have Frozen, who's one of the Analytic mods. And it's actually very similar to another team that's going to be coming up later, but it fell short of it for kind of a few reasons that I think, again, warrants more explanation a bit later. But the main thing is that Sneasler isn't the best follow-up to Terapagos. Roaring Moon was still in the pool at the time, and Terapagos did actually get picked up way early, but I can understand wanting to try something new, because he had first overall Terapagos. The main thing is that this team feels like it's more of a Sneasler team than a Terapagos team, when Terapagos is definitely the better Pokemon to build around. And again, this is a Pearl pool, but there's multiple things that Terapagos kind of likes to have in its to have behind it, where it likes to have something that can be a really strong physical abuser to help supplement the fact that it's a strong special attacker, which Sneasler just doesn't do, unfortunately. It's a little bit too kind of hit or miss in matchups to fully justify it. And, you know, it does like Healing Wish support. It doesn't have to have it, but it likes it. The Terra Mew is a little bit strange because of that, where it likes to I guess the main thing is that this team very much would like to have something other than Terapagos to kind of be a statement piece of this team, where it wants to have like a Roaring Moon behind it to really fully fulfill this combination, as opposed to, it feels like Terapagos is almost an afterthought behind the Sneasler, because it has very good Sneasler support in Tornadus, which can set Tailwind. It has Rillaboom, which sets grassy terrain. It has Slow Pivot and Primarina to safely get in properly. But Sneasler's not really the best Pokemon to have a core built around, is the problem, where it has a lot of issues. And the lower tiers of this team can be a little bit strange as well. Tyranitar is probably underrated, but it's kind of a weird pickup that late in the draft. It was actually 8 points, so probably isn't even underrated. I think it's just not that good. And there are other 8-pointers that I think this team probably could benefit from. And then this team's hazard setting is very reliant on Mew. Outside of, at least in terms of the spikes department, which isn't ideal because that's your most expensive Terra Captain, which I think is what you want to be the primary thing that you set up in an end game. So it's just kind of difficult to properly place it, just because a lot of this team would really benefit from having a second high tier that actually can be abusive, that isn't just reliant on setting a grassy terrain up or setting a Tailwind up or something. So that's kind of... I still think that Terapagos on its own boosts this team up compared to the previous three rather, right? 4. Because the other 4 don't really have that Pokemon on them that you can really kind of say, okay, at least it has a top tier. Terapagos really is that top tier, but it just doesn't really follow up on it as effectively as you could have, and there are other stronger teams as a result of it. So, moving on to rank number 11, we have Iono, who we finally get into kind of a strong top 2 compared to the previous few teams. I actually put it at rank number 10. Dawson put it at rank number 11. But the main thing driving this team is Meowscarada Landorus. That is a very strong top 2 that will basically carry most games. But the problem is the follow-up behind it. Golden Go isn't actually an effective follow-up upon those, especially Terra, when there are other options. And you can nitpick too. I mean, Garchomp is actually still in the pool. Meowscarada Garchomp is stronger than Meowscarada Lando T, and Tinglu is still available, which Tinglu is also stronger. But the problem is that Golden Go isn't an effective follow-up on those. There are multiple other things that would... I mean, the main thing is that you want something that can properly be a strong threat behind these, because Meowscarada is strong, but it's not actually that strong. It's more of a late game threat as opposed to anything else. And Lando T, while it's good, has its own host of flaws in this generation that it kind of... You definitely don't want something that is kind of slow, reliant on Nasty Plot if you want it to do anything. You don't want that to be your only follow-up to those, because after that you kind of have You have a few things that synergize okay, but for the most part it's kind of weird pickups that don't have a lot of synergy. Blaziken is interesting, but it doesn't synergize that well, I feel, on top of these things, because you don't have like spikes or anything. Blaziken loves spikes. Hisuian Zoroark I don't think has a great partner on this team. It can maybe disguise as Meowscarada once. I guess it can be a Blaziken disguise, but it's not taking hits for Blaziken that... like, neutral hits on Hisuian Zoroark are still going to kill it, and Blaziken isn't taking hits, like, super effective hits on Blaziken are still neutral on Zoroark. So you're mostly probably looking to take bug hits and fighting hits. So that kind of limits you exclusively to disguising as Meowscarada, which isn't ideal. I guess you could disguise as Golden-Go like once to take a ghost hit. But it's just kind of not an ideal partner, and you could Terra, but then you give away that it's Zoroark. So that's kind of the issue there. Palafin is actually quite strong. I actually like Palafin a lot on this team. But again, I think that it benefits a lot from having a Spike Setter, which it just doesn't. So that is an angle where maybe potentially Landorus T could be replaced with Tinglu, but then this team doesn't have a ground immunity. Reun, I actually kind of like the Reuniclus pickup because it's an interesting lower tier option with Regenerator. Dragalge is good. Galvantula is kind of weird. I don't know. It's just one of those teams where I think that the idea is there. I just think it needs like one or two follow-up picks that would push this to be better, where I just don't think it was followed up upon properly after the front two. And I definitely think that out of all the teams that have like a strong top two, for me at least, it's the weakest. But it's actually kind of difficult to place specifically. Like basically this, Frozen's team to about rank 4, they're mostly more similar to each other. So it's more kind of nitpicking specifically what we prefer in one team as opposed to another. And for me, this is where it kind of placed at about 10th, 11th. Which is a good segue into the action rank number 10 team, which is Mystery. So Mystery's team has an insanely scary front two in Dragapult Zarude. But the problem with this team is that the follow-up is atrocious on those. Almamola round 3, pick 3 is... that's something that I would do. That's not a good thing. Again, there's actually really good options on this team kind of behind it. Tinkaton and Zapdos are good follow-ups. Donphan's a good low-tier spinner, and Azelf is pretty good, but I think that you really benefit a lot from having something else on that round 3 as opposed to Almamola, even if it kind of axes your points completely. Because there's still some pretty good options available that, while they kind of wreck your points, still give you a really strong option to have some of these options, but have like maybe a lower tier poison as opposed to Okidogi, which I just don't think is particularly effective on this team. The problem is Okidogi fulfills a very, very similar role to Zarude, and just being a physically inclined bulk up spammer, but it just, you're never going to bring it over Zarude for that purpose. Charizard and Greedent, you could combine those into one Pokemon and be perfectly happy. Greedent is completely useless in this format because there's no Spectrier. And again, this Alamomola is just kind of completely ruining this team in a lot of ways. I think that it's not necessarily, like, it's not that Alamomola is bad for this team, it's that it could be something better, and it's way early to pick up. It kind of makes the idea behind Zarude. Zarude doesn't like having passive things around it, and Alamomola is completely passive. But this team is still like completely carried by Dragapult Zarude and having some decent follow-up support behind it. And just that on its own, I think puts it above the previous teams. But some of the issues behind it is, again, especially kind of the low tiers, keep it from being that much higher than where it is here at rank number 10. And another thing that's actually with this team is that it doesn't have proper spikes. There's nothing on this team that gets spikes or T-spikes, despite the fact that Zarude and Dragapult really appreciate those. It is decent rockers, but no spikers, and the fairy resists are kind of dire. Tinkaton is your fairy resist, and that's not great to have that be your only fairy resist on the team. And your ghost resists are also kind of dire. Zarude's your only one. So I get the Greedent pickup, but there's not a ton of reason to get that when Spectre's not in the pool. I'm not sure I said it, but it's Diamond Pool. So it was pick 3. Anyways, that will segue us into pick number 9. So this is Hysterically, which is the other Terapagos Sneasler team, which, as you can see, is the most divisive team so far by our power rankers. So I said this team, we both said this team was better than Frozen's team. So it's actually very similar. Terapagos Sneasler, Primarina, Rillaboom are all in common. But where it starts to differ are the other options behind it. So this has Terra Kingambit, Terra Jolteon, and Terra Cresselia. Which Terra Kingambit actually I think is a good partner to Sneasler, because Sneasler typically is going to die in a position where it doesn't sweep. So Gambit actually is a better partner for it than Mew. And it has better hazard support options, where Clodsire sets spikes for this team, and I mean that's mostly it, is Clodsire sets spikes. The rocks are actually weaker on this team, but I think spikes is a better hazard than rocks anyways currently. Jolteon probably isn't going to come Terra over King Gambit very often, but it's actually a decent backup option. The Arcanine Hisui especially is good though. That's a really strong Terra. And Cresselia is a good Lunar Dance user to pair with either Terapagos or King Gambit, depending on what you want to abuse with. The main thing again is just that this team doesn't have a premium top tier to pair with Terapagos. Roaring Moon again was still available when Sneasler was picked up, and it's just one of those things where I think that if this team had like a better Pokemon than Sneasler as its second best, then it would be a much better case for a strong team, where Terra Gambit probably is a little bit like, you don't need Terra Gambit if you have like one of the follow-up options behind it. Again, Roaring Moon, you can get later on other Terra options that are more budget, but that still fulfill a role very well. And as for like hazard removal, Terapagos is still a very good spinner, but the problem is you don't want to run rapid spin on it every week. You want to preferably have a secondary removal option, which Frozen's team also did not have, but Tropico's likes to run rock polish sets a lot. It likes to run setup, it likes to run bulky sets, but it doesn't like to run rapid spin every week. It likes to mix it up a lot. This team doesn't give it the opportunity to kind of switch it up. It's reliant on it for rapid spin, especially with a lot of things that don't like to run heavy duty boots. Like Gambit doesn't like to run heavy duty boots. Rillaboom doesn't like to run heavy duty boots. Sneasler doesn't like to run heavy duty boots. And so you're basically asking for spike spam into this team, and you have to run rapid spin Terrapagos if you want to not have that happen. And this team also is a little bit suffering in terms of a couple, like the offenses are a little bit suffering. Again, mainly because you don't have the main abuser behind it. But it can kind of supplement that a bit because Gambit's is so good in the late game. So again, the main reason I think this is better than Frozen's team is that Gambit and Hisuian Arcanine are better than Mew and Tyranitar, but there's just too many flaws to really put it that much higher than where it is at the moment. And we get into the top half of the power rankings now. Starting with rank 8. Egotistical L Kid, who was in the Diamond Pool that got round 1 Iron Valiant, followed up by Roaring Moon. Which, this team is interesting. It's kind of like dead average for a lot of reasons. So, Roaring Moon as a follow-up to Iron Valiant, I actually understand. There's still Darkrai in the pool is something worth pointing out, and Garchomp also still in the pool, but like I think that if this team had both of those instead of the next 2 Mons, instead of Roaring Moon and Galarian Slowking, I think this team actually is like really, really strong. I'm not, like, I understand the regen core idea. Terra Hydrapple's a little bit outdated in the meta. But, you know, it's kind of nitpicks a little bit for that. The Glow King and Corviknight pickups for me, though, are kind of a little bit holding this team back. I think this team benefits a lot from having things that can properly follow up on Roaring Moon. So again, even Roaring Moon just not being there is a benefit. I think Darkrai is a far superior partner to Iron Valiant, but there's better Terra options that can follow it up. For example, Iron Crown is good for this team, even if it is a bit expensive. And, you know, there's just... And you could also even argue that this team could benefit from, like, a Tinglu. To supplement it with spikes that, you know, you cover with Sandy Shocks later. But Sandy Shocks is only... It's only so good. Right? That's kind of where I think the flaws of this team really shine, is the lower tiers. Sandy Shocks isn't like a world beater. It's okay. I think Cloyster and Floatzel are just terrible, though. I think that for water types that are available, if you're relying on those, and they're both low tiers, then it's just kind of dire. That means that you're basically... Your water and fire resists are completely reliant on Hydrapple. Cloyster can be okay, but Floatzel's not good at all. I actually kind of like the Necrozma pickup. I think that it's a decent secondary Terra Captain for the Hydrapple. The problem is that it likes to kind of hog the Terra a bit too much. And it does leave your team a little bit more susceptible to getting spammed with dark types, especially ones that have strong coverage into Iron Valiant and Roaring Moon. But, and definitely especially ghost types into this team are really strong. Roaring Moon being your only resist isn't ideal. Dragapult, for example, is kind of a little bit scary outside of Iron Valiant. But, and I think this team's kind of dead average in terms of where it kind of stands in the current Analytic lineup, where it has definitely some flaws. The removal can be improved. It's very reliant on Corviknight, but I think it's okay. If anything, I think so far the biggest thing I can say is that the diamond pool, as we only have one person left from the diamond pool to talk about, definitely had some interesting drafts. And you left some very interesting mons on the board that anybody can still take. And, you know, since we're talking about the diamond pool, why not finish on the last person to talk about in the diamond pool, which is Germoy, who, let's just, you know, talk about this for a second. Back wheel managed to get Tusk, Terratorn, Pecharunt. That you in the diamond pool let him get that top 3. Which is disgusting. But the main issue is the follow-up on that, where especially the back end suffers a lot. But I think it starts with Hisuian Samurott, where Hisuian Samurott is kind of a weird Pokemon to rank properly, especially in terms of this team, where it's at spikes, and you really like having Pecharunt there to absorb Rapid Spin. But I feel like this team desperately benefits from having something else in that position to more effectively capitalize on your front 3 being just so strong, where getting something like a second regen mon to form a regen core with Torn T, getting a water type that's a little bit better at fulfilling the pivot role, such as like Rotom Wash or something, because you already fulfill the spikes role properly with Ogerpon. I mean, even Cyclozar, as funny as it might sound to have so many ice weaknesses stack up, is also a pretty solid follow-up, because it fulfills the regen core. I just don't... Hisuian Samurott's just kind of not inspired for me. Cornerstone's actually a really strong Pokemon for this team. It gives you spikes, it gives you good options. Mesprit gives you, I don't know, Healing Wish. It's okay. That's all I can really say about Mesprit. It's kind of okay. The main thing is that Terra Entei and Terra Hisuian Avalugg, they're never coming over Terra Torn. And Florges just kind of sucks. Like, it's just not it's just not good. I'm sorry. And I think this team would benefit a lot from having a stronger fairy type, but also just having a steel type. This team doesn't have a steel type at all to cover for kind of a crippling fairy weakness. Pecharunt being the only resist isn't good enough, because a lot of things can run coverage for it and will run coverage for it. The hazards department, while strong, also isn't necessarily unbeatable. Petrunt's weak into all three of the premier spinners, and you don't have consistent ways of setting rocks outside of Tusk and Mesprit, which again, you don't necessarily want to bring Mesprit to every battle, and Tusk doesn't like running rocks very often. Hisuian Samurott can run consistent spikes, but again, I think that it's just kind of a weird fit for this team. It can be good, but I just don't know if it's necessarily the right fit. Again, it's just the bottom three are just terrible. Your team is so linear from the top end that you barely have to prepare for Florges, and then the rest of the other two are non-factors. I think this team is going to be completely carried by its front three. That's just so strong that it's unbelievable, but I think that it would be very beneficial to pick a better back end for this team, specifically Entei, Florges, and Avalugg. Those are just not good. They're never coming over any of your real mons, and I think that's what holds this team back ultimately. So, yeah, we managed to get through all of Diamond Pool before touching more than a couple people in Pro Pool. How about that, huh? But obviously that has to change, and it changes starting with Squirted Sun, who has kind of a similar front three, not quite the same because obviously Darkrai is not nearly as strong as Torn T, but it's actually very similar in a lot of ways, where this team has some of the same flaws, but in different ways, where I think this team follows up very badly upon its front three. Heatran is not a particularly strong Terra Captain to kind of build a team around, and Screamtail was picked up way too early. Screamtail benefits... this team kind of has some weird role overlaps too. Golden Go and Screamtail both are good screen setters, but you don't necessarily want them both to do that. And Screamtail's passive on top of that. Golden Go is an interesting case because I don't necessarily dislike it on this team. It's just you don't have enough hazards to kind of back it up. I think if Screamtail was a decent hazard setter, or Heatran was a decent hazard setter, then we could be more interested. But they aren't. Heatran is actually kind of bad. I don't like this thing at all, especially on this team. I think that it's just going to kind of be a liability. And Screamtail was definitely picked up too early. There are better fairy types available. There's better screen setters available. Like if this thing was as a Uxie, I wouldn't even bat an eye. I'm not gonna lie. But it's a Screamtail, and that's what you have. This team does actually get a backup spinner that's usable in Serena, which I think is nice. And it has Vikavolt, which is good, and Terra Salamence, which is those are all good. It's just specifically Screamtail and Heatran I think are kind of a waste on this team. I think this team has a lot of potential outside of those two specifically. I don't think that Golden Go is being properly utilized in this type of a team, where you don't have anything with spikes. You don't have you have webs, which can be useful, but the lack of spikes specifically, and T-spikes, is not good. And then you also don't have a grounded poison, so T-spikes into your team is extremely scary. That's very hard to deal with. And then the fighting resist situation is a little bit... You have them there, but they also share... They don't cover they all have their own flaws in terms of how coverage deals with them. That's pretty common for fighting types. Like, Keldeo is actually so scary into this team. Because it just kind of clicks 2 moves into you and you're dead. But I don't know, fighting isn't actually the best example. I think Fairy is a better example, but you do have Heatran does answer that well. That's one thing it does do, but it gets worn down so fast. And again, it doesn't actually have Eruption in this generation. So I don't know. It's one of those that's kind of hard to play specifically because the flaws are kind of glaring. The no grounded poison is especially dire, and I think Heatran and Screamtail are just so bad. But I think the rest of the team is actually quite solid, has very good pieces to it. So with that, we move on to rank number 5 with Epic Pants, who has, again, a very strong top 3. I don't consider Glamora part of that top 3, but I consider Greninja. But that's still Iron Valiant, Zarude, Greninja, which is incredibly scary. The main thing, again, is kind of some of the follow-up options are a little bit weak. I think Glamora isn't necessary on this team. This team would benefit a lot more from having a different grounded poison. But Glamora is still good. You can argue for or against it, and I think that that's totally valid conversation. Latios isn't the right Eon Twin. This team definitely prefers Latias to Latios. Healing Wish is just so strong of a follow-up option to pair with Zarude. But Latios does do more damage, so I guess you can, look at that. But I think Latios is definitely a better follow-up. And then, this team has decent synergies behind it. It has good fairy resists with Rotom Heat and Registeel. It has removal, relatively consistent removal in Donphan and cope removal in Glamora. Haunter is kind of a meme, but it's 1 point, so what are you going to do? It's just more that I think that some of the roles that are filled in this team, there's things that do it better that you could have gotten. Specifically, Latios definitely has, again, Latias is definitely a better option. And Glamora is very hit or miss in terms of its viability. But I can understand why you picked it up. It provides this team with consistent spikes, consistent T-spikes, a surprise special hitter. So I think this team's actually very, very strong. And I think it's really the first example of a really strong team in the Analytic roster, where it definitely has good synergies behind it. It's just missing maybe 1 or 2 things. 1 or 2 things are kind of subpar compared to the quality of it. Haunter even could arguably be a better 1-pointer, but it's kind of nitpicking a little bit. Because this team has good hazards. It's got Greninja, it's got Glamora, it's got okay removal. It's par for the course for Gen 9 though. Arguably the main thing is that it actually doesn't have a good spin blocker. Haunter is only there as a meme. But you can run Terra Ghost through it pretty easily. And Rotom Heat and Registeel are never coming Terra, but it's not like they cost anything to actually click Terra. So for me, it's rank 5, and I think that it's a good team. Yeah. Then rank number 4, we have Willow Rush, who has a Lando Terra Raging Bolt team. Where again, I think this team is very scary. It's got pretty good options behind it. It's got Terra Raging Bolt on its own is pretty scary. It's got Roaring Moon to cover physically. It's got Lando T. It's got good removal. The main thing I have problems with this team is actually Scizor. I think that Scizor brings this team down. For one, because it's so early. I think it was kind of picked up with the thought process of, oh, I don't have that many points left, I'm going to pick up something cheap, when it's not really contributing to being a steel type for this team. I think there's better steel types still available, actually. And it's like the thing with this team is that it's a little bit like the Tentacruel and Quaquaval combination. I think is good because it covers for Hearth Flame specifically, because you need good removal for Hearth Flame. The problem is that I don't necessarily know how much I agree with Hearth Flame. But that's, again, I think it's works for here. It provides spikes, provides a decent physical attacker. Sylveon, maybe a waste of a Terra, but it's Sylveon. It's a little bit of a meme fairy, but it's not bad. Hatchrim's a good one-pointer. It's just purely Scizor for me for this team. I think that it so desperately wishes it was a better steel type for this team, because your main fairy resists are Tentacruel and Hearth Flame. And you don't have your dragon resist is Sylveon, which again, Sylveon's okay, but it's kind of a meme to an extent. So there's still some decent options available too, but it's kind of difficult. I'd say I don't know, there's just so much left in so much actually left in Analytic. It's kind of funny, but yeah, I think this team is quite strong. Offensively, it's got a lot of boxes checked. It's got it's got the Bolt, it's got the Roaring Moon, it's got the Lando T. I've always been a big fan of Quaquaval. It's got good removal. Hazards are a little weak to an extent. You've basically got one strong Rock Setter and one strong Spike Setter, and the Spike Setter is kind of inconsistent, but I don't think this is a team that really needs Hazard set up that much. You don't have a Ghost type, but you don't have that strong a Hazard set up, so you don't necessarily need one. You don't have a good Ghost resist outside of Roaring Moon. That is a bit concerning. But other than that, this is a pretty strong team that definitely will be hard to prep for, because I'm thinking about some of the preparation into Bolt Roaring Moon. That's really scary. So next up, ranked number 3, we have, and this is where we start getting to the really good teams, where they basically have only a few nitpicks behind them. But we start with Food Bee at rank number 3 with Pult Wellspring and Gliscor, and this team is just basically really strong. It's got good offensive presence, and Pult, Wellspring, Cinderace, Terra Thundurus is even kind of threatening. It's got okay removal in Blastoise. It's got good hazard setting in Gliscor and Tinkaton. It's got good supporting capabilities in both of those two. The only thing for me that sets this team back a little bit is that Gallade and Skuntank could be better. Skuntank actually is fine, but it could be better still. Like if we're talking about things in that point range, I mean, it's okay. It's okay. How much is it? It's 3 points. I mean, it's okay. I think it's okay. The Gallade, I don't think is very strong though. I think Gallade is kind of a cope fighting type that doesn't really do the job at all. But again, that's kind of minor nitpicks behind it that you can get into. This team is going to be so scary to prep into, because you basically have to prepare for the fact that this team has so much speed behind it. Bolt and Cinderace are incredibly strong, and they're going to basically be faster than everything else on the board. It is a little bit unfortunate that there's such a big speed gap between Bolt and Cinderace, because Cinderace is 370, but I don't think it's gonna be that big of an issue. There's not a lot that can take full advantage of that. Basically Darkrai, which there's only actually one in the pool right now. And again, the hazard setting is so strong that even though there's really only one or two things that can consistently deal really high damage, you're gonna have the hazards advantage most of the time to basically just brute force your way through it. It is a bit unfortunate you don't really have like a good ground poison outside of Skuntank, but your removal option, and when your removal option is Blastoise and you have Wellspring, that's a little sad. Wellspring really likes having a strong spinner around it, but I mean, you take what you get, I guess. If anything, that's also kind of one of the things that's holding it back just a little bit, but it's just the offense on this team is so scary, especially with hazards up, that it's definitely, for me, the third best team in Analytic. Then, next up, in second place, we have Vague Parallels, who has pick 2 in Pearl Pool, Meowscarada, Iron Treads, Terra Keldeo, front 3, which is just so strong. I have something very similar for my team, except I don't actually have the stronger option. In Iron Treads is a stronger option than Landorus T, because it provides immediate spinning support, an immediate steel type. It's really good. And then it's just one of those things where you've got Meowscarada, which is a strong, fast physical hitter, followed up with a good ground type, followed up with a strong special attacking Terra type, and that's a tried and true combination, especially when that ground type is Iron Treads. And then Dragonite's the next Pokemon on the team, which is the Fighting Resist. And Dragonite's so good. I don't really have anything else to follow up on. Dragonite's just so good. Mesprit's a solid option. Ironmouth is really strong. Again, the thing that kind of holds this team back a little bit is actually the one-pointers. I'm higher on Diancie than Dawson was. Dawson said, oh, I don't like Diancie, but I think it's fine. It's maybe a little bit not necessary for this team, but there's not a lot of strong fairy type options down there. Like maybe a Azumarill would have actually been a decent pickup. It's not a good Terra, but in some ways it's a better pickup than Diancie because it's more consistent. But again, we're kind of nitpicking a little bit. But I mean, the main thing Diancie brings is that it brings spikes for this team, which it doesn't have. So that's a big thing for it. That I think that actually just kind of trumps it every other fairy type existing. Like, you're never gonna bring this thing Terra, but it's an option if you want, and it has spikes, so that's good. But then the one pointers are just the issue. where Spite Ops, you don't need webs on this team. And Zebstrika, it's kind of a meme, I get it, but it's just not very good. There's better one-pointer options you could have gotten. But I mean, this team is going to be so scary to prep for. It's got basically some of the strongest offensive capabilities that Gen 9 can offer in Meowscarada, Keldeo. Iron Moth is a little sad that it's not Terra, but it's there, and it's got, you know, decent options. It's got like the Heavy Duty Boots T-Spike set that it can actually spam pretty consistently. Dragonite's really strong, Mesprit's really strong, and it just, you know, Zebstrika and Spite Ops, if those were better mons, I think this team would be really scary. Which leads me into the number one team here, which, you know, it's kind of obvious by now, but it's Dawson's team, which I promise, this isn't like favoritism or anything. This is just a really good team. This is a Manu team drafted for Dawson, which is just, it's got everything. It's got the strong top three, and then it's just a DPL top three: Chomp, Terratorn, Petrant. It's actually in not the right order. There are a couple of things that weren't in the right order. This is one of them. Torntiu is the first pickup. Again, blame Dawson's document, because he doesn't know how to set things up properly, and I made him do it, but that top three is really strong. Corviknight immediately is a really, really good follow-up, because that provides you good steel type to be a fairy resistance for Chomp that's not Petrant. Cornerstone gives spikes. Rotomosh provides a consistent water type that can pivot, so it's a good slow pivot, as well as being just a really solid fire resist that's also not Garchomp. Comfey is a decent low tier fairy where it can be kind of scary in its own right with setup options. If anything, Comfey is actually kind of the weakest link on this team. I think that it's decent, but I'm not that high on non-Terra Comfey. But you know, we're living in Manu's world, so what can you say? Terra Low Kicks is actually kind of a cook. I think this thing is pretty strong. Tinted Lens is hilarious, especially if you're hitting Choice Banded Tinted Lens, Sucker Punches, or First Impressions, or U-turns. So it's pretty crazy. And Terra Colossal is the only removal on this team, but this team doesn't really need a removal because nothing on it struggles that badly. I mean, Corviknight has Defog, but the only thing on this team that desperately needs removal is Cornerstone. And I mean, low kicks, but like, that's not coming to every battle. So just in general, this team has basically everything you want in a team, minus maybe some removal, but it doesn't need the removal that badly, so you can get away with it. And, you know, I'm not the biggest Corviknight fan. I think it's a bit passive, but it works for this team because Petrun is just so stupid that you can afford to punish things that are trying to abuse passive Corviknight. So, as we can all say, Manu has done it again. So, that's the Analytic power rankings. I hope you have enjoyed. And please do keep in mind that these are all our opinions, and that it doesn't matter where you placed. All that matters is whether you win or not. So if you disagree with our placement, then go win, prove us wrong. And good luck, everyone.